I don't know when exactly I started building the project. Maybe the first sketch on a napkin at 2 a.m. Maybe the night I stayed in the office until sunrise because the servers wouldn't stabilize. What I do know is that by the time it was finished, I'd forgotten how to live outside of it. For 18 months, I lived like a ghost in a glass building. Hoodie, black coffee, same desk, same humming lights. I wrote the core framework, the database architecture, and the predictive model. I ran simulations until my fingers went numb. Every line of code, every diagram, every spreadsheet, mine. I wasn't chasing glory. I just wanted to build something real, something that would outlive me. The company had promised innovation. I gave them obsession. When we first started, the project didn't even have a name. It was just Phase Delta, a concept file buried in our internal system. But I believed in it, a dynamic infrastructure model that could predict maintenance failures across entire city grids. A project like that could save millions in lost resources, millions more in taxpayer money. Every morning, I'd unlock my workstation before sunrise. By the time the rest of the office arrived, I'd already be 2 coffees deep, half a dozen simulations running in parallel. They'd joke that I was married to the machine. I'd laugh, because what else was there to do? My boss, Martin Hale, he was the kind of guy who could charm a cactus. Expensive suits, perfect hair, a smile that looked like it belonged on a billboard. He'd stop by my desk once a week, glance at the graphs, and say, "Looks promising." That was his contribution. Optimism in designer shoes. I didn't mind. I wasn't good with people anyway. Let him talk. I'd deliver. The closer we got to completion, the more attention the project started to draw. Investors visited. Journalists whispered about the future of smart cities. And Martin naturally stood at the center of it all. I didn't care, not at first. Let him talk, I told myself again. As long as it worked, the truth would speak louder than any meeting room speech. Then came the presentation day, the big unveiling, months of testing, nights of debugging, the sleepless marathons that left me half alive, all leading to that single morning. The boardroom was packed. Reporters, executives, investors with their polite smiles and colder eyes. I was supposed to present the live demo. The plan was clear. Martin had confirmed it himself the night before. "Don't be late," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "This is your moment." I arrived 15 minutes early. He arrived 10 minutes late, with a media team. They set up cameras, lights. My slides were already on screen, but the title had changed. Introducing the Hale Infrastructure Model. My stomach turned. I blinked, thinking it had to be a mistake. The logo in the corner, the tagline, all of it rewritten overnight. And when the lights dimmed, it wasn't me standing in front of the audience. It was him. Martin's voice filled the room, calm and confident, as he walked through my slides like he'd written every line. He called it his vision. He talked about his strategy, his insights, his leadership. Every time he said "I," a part of me burned. My name wasn't mentioned once. When the applause started, I sat there, invisible in the back row. The investors shook his hand, reporters gathered around him, flashlights burst like fireworks. He smiled for every camera, and I just watched. After the conference, he walked up to me, that same effortless grin plastered on his face. "Great job, man," he said. "Couldn't have done it without you. Couldn't have done it without me." The phrase stabbed deeper than any insult could. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The city lights flickered outside the window. On my monitor, the simulation data still ran. Clean, stable, perfect. I stared at the code for hours, every line a reminder of what I'd built and what had been taken. My inbox filled with congratulatory emails, all addressed to Martin, not one to me, not even a CC. I opened the internal project folder, the one that had all the version logs, timestamps, author IDs. My name appeared hundreds of times. His, twice. Both attached to PowerPoint decks. Somewhere between anger and exhaustion, something inside me shifted. I knew how the system worked. If I spoke up, I'd be labeled difficult. unprofessional, the guy who couldn't play as a team. Martin was too valuable, too well connected. So I did what I'd always done. I kept working. I fixed bugs no one noticed, improved algorithms no one thanked me for, and listened as Martin's voice filled company podcasts about innovation leadership. But I started keeping copies. Every email, every revision, every late-night commit. Not for revenge, not yet, just for the truth. That night, something inside me broke. Not loudly, no shouting, no slammed doors. Just a clean, silent fracture somewhere deep in the part of me that still believed in fairness. When I finally left the office, the cleaning crew was already there. They nodded as I passed, not knowing they were the only ones who ever saw me leave. Outside, the rain had started, the kind that soaks through your clothes before you even open your umbrella. I stood there, watching the reflections of the city ripple in the puddles, and for the first time in my life, I realized, if I disappeared tomorrow, no one at work would notice until the system went down. I walked home that night, drenched and shivering, but there was something else in me now, a quiet clarity, sharp as glass. He thought he'd won. He thought the credit was his. But he hadn't taken everything. Not yet. Because the code, the real foundation of the project, still carried my signature, buried deep in the back end, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. And one day, someone would look. The week after the presentation felt like walking through glass that no one else could see. People kept congratulating Martin in the hallways, repeating his phrases back to him like they were gospel. He started using words I'd written in my design doc as if he'd dreamed them up in the shower. Our Slack channel turned into a gallery of applause emojis. My name didn't appear once, but that was just the beginning. The board scheduled a victory, all hands. Martin stood on stage with a clicker and a wireless mic, retelling the story of how we pivoted in Q3 and built resilience into the failure model, like he'd been there at 3 a.m. when the cluster died and I had to rebuild the data pipeline from raw logs. A junior analyst asked about the anomaly detector. Martin glanced down at his notes, then over at me. Our engineer can speak to that offline, he said, and moved on. Our engineer, not my name, not even my title. Just a role he could drag into a meeting like a whiteboard. I didn't storm out. I wrote more tests. I annotated the model's edge cases. I hardened the alerting system. And I started to collect everything. Design drafts, Git diffs, profiler screenshots, timestamps that showed I was committing code when Martin's Outlook calendar said dinner with investor. Not because I had a plan yet. I just needed proof that I hadn't imagined my life. 3 days later, we shipped the pilot to our first municipal client. The deadline had been moved up because Martin promised a live demo for a magazine piece. He wanted a headline moment. The pilot was safe, but early. I said so, carefully. He smiled without his eyes and said, "Great, can't wait, for perfect." At 1:17 a.m., the telemetry started throwing warnings. Not failures, just hairline cracks. A sensor stream from Grid 7 kept dropping packets and rejoining. The model flagged it. The dashboard turned amber. I wrote a temporary adapter to stabilize the feed and pushed it behind a feature flag. Then sent a quiet note to the client's ops team with steps to monitor their ISP edge. I CC'd Martin. He replied at 8:42 a.m. Thanks, team. Team. Later that morning, I found a sticky note on my keyboard from Maya, our newest hire. That hotfix saved the 5 a.m. shift. Ops called. They were grateful. I told them it was your patch. It wasn't much, but for 5 seconds, I let myself breathe. A small drop of truth in an ocean of performance. The truth didn't last long. HR scheduled me for a career development chat. There were 3 of them in the room, HR, Martin, and a VP, who once asked me if Jason was that Google thing. They told me the company wanted to help me grow as a collaborator. They mentioned tone, visibility, pathways. No one mentioned authorship. We want to make sure you feel recognized, HR said, handing me a laminated card with company values. Martin nodded like a surgeon who just completed a complex empathy transplant. On my walk back to my desk, Maya caught up with me at the water cooler. "Hey," she said, lower voice, eyes on the floor. "If you ever need a witness, for what you built." She didn't say more. She didn't have to. I just nodded and said thanks. Small catharsis. Then back to work. We started weekly Hail Model press briefings. Marketing asked me for high-level bullet points that Martin could translate for broader audiences. I wrote the bullets. He translated them into more bullets. A journalist emailed a list of technical questions. Martin forwarded them to me with, "Can you draft my answers?" I drafted answers. He added 2 adjectives and his signature. One night, after everyone left, I opened the server that ran our internal wiki and exported the entire project space with history. I printed a hard copy of the architecture diagram, the one I'd drawn by hand on year-old plotter paper because Visio kept crashing under the shape count. The corners curled as the printer spat them out, the paper warm and a little greasy. I slid them into a flat file next to my lease. If nothing else, I told myself, one day I'd want to remember how this looked, before people repackaged it into a keynote. When the pilot survived its first week, the client invited us to their control center. Martin arrived 20 minutes late with coffees for the executives and a joke about engineers who never sleep. He gave the tour guide version of our system while I stood near the console, listening to the hum of equipment, the honest sound of electricity doing work. At one point, the city's head of infrastructure leaned in and asked a question Martin couldn't answer. He gestured at me. I explained in 2 sentences. The head nodded and said, "Smart solution." Martin clapped my back like I was his intern. On the way out, he pulled me aside and said, "Let's keep you behind the curtain, okay? It makes the story cleaner." Cleaner. That word stayed with me. I stopped trying to be seen and focused on making the system undeniable. I set up immutable logging on the training runs. I tagged each model with a build hash and a signed manifest. I wrote a plain English README inside the repo that explained line by line what each component did and why. Not because I thought the company would read it, because a future court might, or a future me who needed to remember he wasn't crazy. Maya pinged me late Thursday. "Heads up, marketing just queued a press kit calling Martin the father of predictive infrastructure." I stared at the screen. Not anger, just a cold, clean stillness. I replied, "Thanks." Then I opened my email drafts folder where a subject line had sat untouched for a week. For the record. Inside was a letter to myself, dated, stamped, with a checksum of the repository and the rollout schedule, plus the emails where Martin approved the early launch over my documented risk notes. I attached the signed model manifests and the Git log showing authorship over 18 months. I CC'd a personal address I'd created that morning on a provider none of us used for work. I didn't send it. Not yet. I just watched the cursor blink. On Friday, the Investor Magazine profile went live. Martin's face, our product behind him. A quote in bold about vision over execution. The comments filled with praise for leadership. Our internal Slack lit up with celebration gifts. Someone posted a cake emoji. My desk stayed quiet. At 6:13 p.m., as the office emptied into the weekend, my phone rang from an unknown number. It was the city ops lead. He spoke fast. There'd been a voltage fluctuation on the East Loop. Our model had flagged it before the substation readouts did. "Whoever designed that detection layer," he said, "saved us $250,000 in damage." He wanted to send a note to our execs. I asked him to send it to the generic team inbox. He paused, then said, "You did this, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He sent the note anyway. On Monday morning, Martin read the note aloud in stand-up. "Great teamwork," he said, eyes skating over me. Then he said he'd be in New York the next 2 weeks. Telling our story, he left before anyone could ask questions. 2 weeks. That afternoon, I sat alone in a quiet conference room with the blinds half closed, and wrote a simple, boring document. A timeline. No adjectives. Just dates, commits, emails, tickets, signatures. I added the investor promise that forced our early launch and the internal mitigation steps I'd taken to keep the pilot safe. I zipped it with the repo snapshot and the model manifests. I hashed the archive and printed the hash. I sealed a copy in an envelope and put it in a safety deposit box I rented under my own name on my lunch break. I walked back to the office with the key in my pocket and the rain starting again. That thin coastal kind that makes the pavement look like it's thinking. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was preparing to stop being erased. I named the archive truthdelta.tar.jesus and placed a copy in a private, encrypted drive with a single line in a text file beside it. If asked, tell the truth. I didn't know it yet, but that file would change everything. The company felt different without Martin's cologne in the hallways. For 2 weeks, the office was quieter, lighter even, though no one dared to say it aloud. His name still floated in the conversations like a ghost you couldn't insult, just in case he returned. But the calm didn't last. Midweek, someone leaked our pilot's back-end metrics to a trade journal. They weren't bad, just too detailed. They showed the real architecture, timestamps, authorship tags. My tags. Within hours, people on LinkedIn were dissecting the logs, trying to figure out who Ian was. I hadn't leaked it, not directly, but someone had found what I'd left in the open. Maybe one of the ops engineers, maybe Maya. The article headline read, "Anonymous engineer built Hale's 45 matters system single-handedly." By noon, the post had gone viral in our industry circles. Comments split in two, half worshipping Martin's vision for hiring geniuses, half demanding credit for the mystery developer. I sat at my desk, pretending to debug code while my heart pounded like it wanted out. At 2:37 p.m., Martin called from New York. The Bluetooth speaker in the open office picked up his voice before I could mute it. "Who touched the logs?" His tone wasn't angry. It was afraid. "Everything we've built is under scrutiny now. Do you understand what's at stake?" He wasn't talking to me directly. He was talking at me, like I was a server he could reboot. I said nothing. The next day, the company's Slack exploded. HR posted a statement of values. The PR lead asked people not to speculate publicly. The VP sent an all-hands invite titled Alignment. Maya messaged me, "You okay?" I typed back, "Define okay." She sent a single line, "Whatever happens, you're not crazy." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, laptop open, the city reflected in the dark screen. I opened the encrypted drive, the one labeled Truth Delta. For an hour, I hovered over the send button. Then I closed it again. I wasn't ready to blow everything up. At 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. A LinkedIn message request from a journalist. "I have reason to believe you contributed significantly to the Hale model. Off record, would you confirm or deny authorship?" My thumb hovered. One tap could set everything on fire. Instead, I replied, "Not confirming. But you're asking the right questions." By the time the sun came up, my chest felt hollow. At noon, I arrived to find the office frozen mid-scandal. Screens showed an email from corporate legal. "Effective immediately, all public statements about Phase Delta are suspended pending internal review." Martin's face was on a muted TV. CNBC interview, his usual grin wilted. A journalist asked about the anonymous engineer. He blinked, stuttered something about team synergy, and smiled too fast. The caption below read, "Crisis at Hale Technologies. Who really built the 45 DOS model?" I watched it 3 times. That night, I received a call from a blocked number. "You think this helps you?" Martin's voice was lower now, almost human. "You're playing with people's careers, with mine." I said quietly, "You played with my life's work." He exhaled through his nose. "Don't make this ugly." "It already is." The line went dead. 2 days later, compliance sent everyone a questionnaire about contributions. Version control and IP chain of custody. A polite audit. Nothing hostile. Yet. I filled mine out with precision. Dates, file hashes, sign commits. The truth didn't need drama. Just clarity. That weekend I walked downtown to clear my head. Billboards glowed with product ads. The same tech buzzwords that used to inspire me. Innovate, disrupt, scale. They sounded hollow now. I stopped at a coffee shop, ordered black drip, and sat by the window watching the rain smear neon across the glass. When I looked down at my phone, a new email was waiting. From compliance@hailtech.com. Subject: confidential. Acknowledgement of receipt body. Thank you for your detailed submission. Please retain your copy for reference. We may reach out for further clarification. Do not discuss this matter externally. An hour later, another email appeared from an anonymous address. Attachment: a PDF of Martin's original presentation slides. Metadata visible. The author field didn't say Martin Hale. It said EM, my initials. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By Monday, the board's internal audit team had flown in from San Francisco. Their presence turned the office electric. Everyone whispered, avoided eye contact, sanitized their desktops. Maya dropped by my desk and left a folded note. Inside was a single sentence. Truth wants out, whether you open the door or not. The audit lasted 3 days. They asked quiet questions, requested logs, emails, access records. I answered each one honestly, without embellishment. No speeches, no accusations, just proof. On Thursday afternoon, Martin returned from New York. His face looked smaller somehow, pale under the perfect tan. He walked straight past my desk into the glass conference room with 2 auditors. The blinds closed. No one said a word for an hour. Then, through the glass, I saw him raise his voice. The first crack in the performance. Papers slammed, his jaw tightened, hands waving like a drowning man explaining calm waters. And then he looked up. Through the blinds, his eyes met mine. For the first time in 2 years, he looked like he actually saw me. The next morning, his office was empty, the nameplate gone. An email from HR announced he had resigned for personal reasons. No farewell message, no final meeting, just silence. People whispered all day, theories blooming like weeds. Some said he'd been caught falsifying credit in investor reports. Others said the audit traced inconsistencies to his travel reimbursements. No one mentioned me. That night, I stayed late again. The city outside glowed under a thin drizzle, same as the night this all started. I opened my project's console one last time, ran a stability check, perfect scores. Then I scrolled to the footer. There it was, the signature hash, my initials embedded in the codebase. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time in months. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't fought in public. But somehow, the truth had done the shouting for me. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the servers. The same sound that used to keep me company when no one else cared. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And as the rain streaked down the glass, I realized something simple, almost funny. I didn't need to destroy him. All I had to do was let his own lies collapse under their weight. That night, I stopped being the quiet one. 2 weeks after Martin's resignation, his name disappeared from the company intranet. The leadership page simply updated overnight. His profile replaced by a press-safe statement. The board thanks Mr. Hale for his contributions to the company's early growth. No one said the word fired, but everyone knew. The first few days were strange. Meetings felt lighter. People lingered by the coffee machine without glancing over their shoulders. For once, no one spoke in buzzwords. There was laughter in the dev pit again. Quiet, nervous at first, like a sound we'd forgotten how to make. Maya stopped by my desk on Friday with 2 mugs of burnt office coffee. "You still haven't said a word about it," she said, handing me one. "There's nothing to say," I told her. "The system works," She raised an eyebrow. Does it? I didn't answer, because she was right. The system didn't work. People did. The system just takes the credit until someone forces it to look at the evidence. The board never called me. No email, no thanks, no official recognition. But one morning I walked into my office and found a small envelope taped to my monitor. No signature. Inside was a printout, a new org chart, my name, lead architect, Phase Delta program. No press release, no speech. Just truth, quietly restored. That was enough. For a while, I thought revenge would feel louder, that I'd want to gloat, to make him watch me climb while he fell. But when it finally happened, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like release. The week after his departure, investors visited again. Same conference room, same glass walls. This time I stood at the front. No cameras, no PR handlers. Just me, the system, and the numbers. I walked them through what we'd built, not with grand phrases, just data. For the first time, people listened. Really listened. They asked questions. I answered. There was no applause when I finished, no flash of cameras, no hashtags. Just a quiet nod from the board chair. Excellent work, she said. Keep it that way. That was all, and somehow it meant more than any standing ovation could. A week later, someone forwarded me an article. Former Hale executive under investigation for misappropriation of credit and misuse of corporate funds? No mention of me. No interview request? I didn't need one. I closed the tab and went back to work. Days turned into a new routine. The project expanded. I hired 2 engineers, one of them Maya. We stopped calling it the Hale model. Officially, it became Delta Core. It felt right. Stripped of vanity, built from the ground up again, this time with people who cared more about building than about being seen building. Sometimes I'd find traces of Martin's presence in the old documentation. A comment in the code, a half-finished paragraph in a slide deck. I didn't delete them. Ghosts deserve their place, too. At night, I'd stay a little longer, watching the server logs roll by. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to remember what it felt like, to stand in the wreckage of something unfair and realize I was still here. I started sleeping again. I stopped checking my email at 2 a.m. I started cooking. Badly, but it was mine. One evening, while closing down my workstation, I found a draft I'd written months ago. The letter to myself. For the record, I opened it, read it slowly, then I added one final line. Truth didn't need my rage, it only needed patience. I saved it. Then I hit delete. Some things don't need to be kept anymore. A few months later, the board asked me to represent the company at a global infrastructure summit. The same kind of event where Martin used to shine. The kind with cameras, glossy badges, and people who mistake confidence for competence. When I stepped onto the stage, the lights were blinding, but I didn't freeze. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to talk about systems. Real systems. Ones that endure long after the applause fades. Halfway through my presentation, I paused, scanning the audience. Rows of faces, some bored, some curious. And I realized something. I didn't hate Martin. He was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was a world that rewards the loudest voice in the room and forgets who built the foundation it stands on. So instead of ending with a pitch, I ended with a sentence that had been echoing in my head since that first night of rain and silence. If you build something real, it doesn't matter who takes the photo. The truth is already in the code. The room went quiet, not the polite kind, the kind that means something landed. Afterward, people shook my hand, asked questions, offered collaborations, but the best part came later, outside, when a junior engineer from another company caught up to me. Hey, he said, nervous smile. I read that article months ago, about the anonymous developer. It kept me from quitting. I just wanted to say, thanks. He left before I could answer. I stood there watching him disappear into the crowd and realized that was the real ending. Not the firing, not the headlines, not the summit. That moment. Quiet, human, unfilmed. I took the long walk home, past the office towers and the billboards, past the rain-slicked glass, where reflections of a city blurred into one another. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible, just free. When I got home, I opened the window and listened to the hum of the city, the same rhythm that once felt like isolation. Tonight, it sounded like peace. I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and let the silence stretch. Because sometimes silence is revenge, not the kind that destroys, the kind that endures. And when the lights flickered across the skyline, I realized the truth I'd been circling all along. I didn't need anyone to say my name anymore. The work said it for me.